Hi, everyone. I'd like to introduce Amol, CEO of Patient Prism. Amol, thank you so much for being a long-term partner of Cardinal, as well as a sponsor for Scaling Up.
Thank you so much, Ritika. Thank you, Cardinal. What a fantastic event this has been. So my name is Amol Nirgudkar. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Patient Prism. Got in the AI business 10 years ago when I asked the question, could we teach Alexa how to understand dentistry? And that's where we began our journey. And over the last 10 years, we've been through the whipsaw and whiplashes with AI, trying to really figure out what drives growth. And my conversation, the title of my presentation today is Finding Needles in Haystacks. And as I read the Wall Street Journal this morning and I saw the title which said tens of thousands of white collar jobs are vanishing as AI starts to bite. And I thought about where AI is today, right? And for the most part, where AI is, and this is a talk I gave in New York a few months ago to healthcare PE guys saying, by the way, AI has done a great job at kind of reducing costs, but for the most part, the hype has not met reality, right? We're not seeing measurable revenue enhancement and value creation coming out of AI. And that's been the predominant wisdom and thinking around the PE community as well as the healthcare community. The MIT study that came out just a month ago, month and a half ago, it says why AI hasn't worked in organizations for a variety of reasons that you can read here, like the learning gap, brittle workflows, right? It's poorly integrated within systems and breaking edge cases. There's misaligned investment. Only 5% of pilots are reaching production. And part of the reason why we love ChatGPT to do our emails and all other things, but employees are not really, the AI has not been adopted as well as we think it should. And that's why we're not, in my view, not seeing revenue growth. Now, when I started the business 10 years ago, and I am clicking, but it's moving in circles. Give me a second, why? I don't know. There it is. Let me just go back. Yeah, when I started the business, I was focusing on conversion of a call into an appointment, which I call the sales process. And then what I realized after doing this for 8 years, all wrong, thinking just about one thing, which is the conversion of the phone, which is very important as we learn from all the speakers. What I realized, this statement, growth stands at the intersection of marketing, sales, and ops. And we said, we've got to build technology stack at the top of the funnel that makes sure that we're monitoring our patients. Are the right patients calling? Are we acquiring them at the right cost, right? In the right quantity? Is sales converting them at the front in the offices, in the call centers? And then eventually is operations able to actually see them, right? And this is what I learned from 10 years in AI is yes, we are in a marketing conference and we have to worry about all the things everybody has talked about, which is attribution and multi-touch attribution, mixed media modeling. All that stuff is great, but we've got to also think about the other two Venn diagram, the other two circles here, which is sales and ops. This is a long flywheel, but if you remember anything from this flywheel, what has failed for us over the first 8 years of business was we got technology, but nobody was able to operationalize it, right? And without operationalization of technology, it all seems like all just jargon, right? AI and everything else, marketing speak, everything is a jargon. So we have to figure out what do we do to operationalize the technology. What we do in the business, if you guys haven't figured this out yet, and if you haven't mapped this out yet, I encourage you guys to map the journey of your patient. Where does it start? Where does it end? Here's where the agency partners like Cardinal, we work with them quite closely to drive demand, right? We're trying to drive demand. We're trying to get them into one of our mechanisms: phone calls, forms, chats, text. And part of what we did at Patient Prism over the last 10 years is figured out, what do you do? Is this happening? Number one. And is it driving this? And when it's driving that, and then it eventually is it driving an appointment? And that's where the part of where the breakdown happens in healthcare, where we just don't realize where the patients are falling off in the funnel or the journey, and then we're trying to fix only marketing. Marketing is needed, but at the end of the day, the patient's got to still move forward. And what I'm going to talk about today is the power of segments and where the needles in the haystacks are, right? Segmentation really transforms data into chaos, into strategic reality, right? We've got to figure out, identify which patients drive profit and growth. Not all patients are created equal. Somebody said that this morning. Allocate marketing and operational resources intelligently, right? Based on capacity and based on what we need. And also focus on coaching and capacity where we are knowing how to deal with high value patients, right? And segmentation is going to be interesting, right? So this was an orthopedic client of ours where we could tell them in real time, based on the segments that were important to them, not us, was how many of the leads are you getting from the segments that you care about? Now, Google Leads drove 2 infusion therapy, 5 surgeries, 12 sports injuries, mix and mix, and understanding that at a very, very level, at this level, allows us to say, all right, well, what do we need more of? Well, Meta needs to drive me more infusion therapy right here, right? I need to understand this by channel, by UTM campaign. Obviously, we need to send those signals back into the ad platforms, which is great, right? But at the very beginning, when I'm talking to my agency partner, I want to be able to ask them, are we driving the right type of leads, right? By location as well. We want to understand that in physical therapy, this is, are we driving the right leads in our offices at the right time? And segmentation is super important. But then we also want to understand from a segmentation perspective, are we flying Delta Airlines with all basic economy seats, right? Now in surgery, in sports injuries, we're scheduling 88%, but in surgery, we're only at 60%, right? And we need to understand that. We need to understand from a segment standpoint, are we driving the right segments of leads? And then are we converting those in the right proportion to drive the most amount of revenue per hour? We don't have an abundance of providers in America. We have an abundance of patients. We just have to figure out, is the right butt sitting in the right seat at the right time driving the right revenue per hour, right? And so we've got to figure out how to segment that in from a marketing lens and from a sales lens. Are we converting the right needles, right? Obviously we have to understand how our agents are doing. Are they order takers or salespeople? What's going on with them? But we have to go deeper in this analysis. It's beyond the scope of my 15-minute talk today. But you got to go deeper into what Elijah does better than Yvette or Grace or Amanda, right? We've got to understand from an operational standpoint, these are called the operational needles, what locations are struggling with what. If Tampa and Orlando are struggling with capacity, which is scheduling, they said no. Tampa office said no to 59 patients because we didn't have room on the schedule. We don't need more demand. We need more supply of doctors. And if we can figure that out, then we can decide to allocate that budget somewhere else. Maybe they need only 1%, but some other office needs 6%. But we also understand when we look at that, right? So in this case, in the orthopedic example, surgery was the 10 patients in this case with a 9,000 LTV couldn't schedule because of insurance and 20 because of capacity. And they have, on an average, they have to wait 12 days to come in for a visit. Now, when you look at this data from this lens, you understand that you may not need more, you don't need to spend more money. You have to figure out how to optimize in terms of your capacity, your insurance, your service availability. And that's what I've learned, working with people like Monu this morning at Dooley and Heartland. What we've realized that very often we can find these needles in haystacks, in sites everywhere. And we have to say is what? We need to create more infusion therapy slots. We can't make them wait 23 days. Right? If you want to generate $14,395, we've got to get the appointment available very, very quickly. We've got to understand by location, right? From a scheduling standpoint, capacity standpoint, what is going on? Like 47% of patients in Tampa can't even schedule because we have no appointments available. I want to understand that, right? Then I want to go back. I want to go back to the COO and say, guys, we're driving all these leads, but we don't have any appointments available. Some people need immediate appointments, emergencies. How are we looking at that? And when we understand that deeper insight, we're able to make adjustments, right? Otherwise it's always marketing's fault. But it's not, right? We have empirically figured out over 300 million conversations in 10 years. We figured out if operations is not ready to take the patient on, no matter what marketing does, how many horses you're taking to the water, if operations is not able to drink the water and resolve objections from scheduling and insurance, we're kind of fighting a losing battle. We want to understand, right, supply and capacity real well. We understand lead times, not connection status, cancellations. We want to understand that really well. One of the things we did that was very unique, and people made fun of me 10 years ago when I said, I'm going to provide these healthcare organizations the ability to have a second chance to make the first impression. So when a patient calls at 9 o'clock, at 9:05, and they hung up the phone and they don't book an appointment, I want to tell them right away what to do to bring that patient back, right? This is instant gratification. Orthopedics, woman called, son had playing varsity soccer. This was a patient who needed a potentially ACL tear, and this is what we did, right? And there was limited provider availability, insufficient empathy. They wanted to come right now. They were disappointed. Had United Healthcare was worth $5,000. Now, if you understand this stuff in 20 seconds after an interaction goes sideways, and sideways I mean by not going the way you wanted to go, whether the patient didn't book an appointment, whether it's orthopedics, it's ENT, whether it's dentistry, whether it's optometry. At the end of the day, we want to know why we're dropping the ball. And if we know that we dropped the ball, and we fumbled the ball, is there a way for us to pick up that ball and still score a touchdown, right? That's the idea. And when we did this 10 years ago, people looked at me funny. But today, we have thousands and thousands and thousands, over 10,000 clients today, actually using this instantaneous recovery tool to figure out, can we at least recover the high value patients that we deserve, that we have spent measurable marketing dollars, right? Cost per click is high, cost per acquisition, all that stuff. That's great. But we've spent the money, but somehow we couldn't get them back, right? The impact we've had on organizations has been massive, right? In terms of whether organizations start at 41%, we saw them in 6 months at 59. And these are mostly larger groups, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 locations. The medium groups were interesting because these guys were doing extremely well in marketing, were doing extremely well on the sales side and the call center side, but somehow they didn't have capacity. So when they looked at Patient Prism data, they said, oh my God, all we have to do is expand capacity, change our templates. And they were able to squeeze more patients in for the amount of providers that they had, right? And that's important. And that's important. What I've learned in 10 years is this is the reason why clinic initiatives fail in healthcare. Change management, clinical alignment, and calibration. We've got to figure out how do you get the doctors and the clinicians on board with whatever initiative we're trying to do. We've got to figure out how to calibrate that between marketing, sales, and ops. And the change management focus has to be there. People don't care about AI or anything else. People just care about their jobs. And if we can get them to actually care about and improve their workflows and make them believe that this is going to actually help them become better, every initiative, no matter how good the AI is going to fail. So I think calibrating marketing, sales, and ops is really the way to succeed today. And the work that we've done with Cardinal has been massively important because one of the things we've seen done well, especially with agency partners like Cardinal, there's an immense amount of amazing leads that are being sent in, but somehow capacity or insurance challenges or financial obstacles or service not available, whatever those might be, are somehow preventing us from growing the business, right? And so I think part of what I think we need to do in AI going forward in 2026, as you guys think about growing the business and marketing optimization, we've got to look at the other two elements, sales and operations. And when we look at the same all these through a segmented lens on what are the types of patients we need, then growth really starts becoming random, right? It becomes very predictable. I can say in orthodontics, I need to get 10 more starts per month. In orthopedics, we can say we need to do 10 more knee replacements per month. And we can start speaking the language of English instead of speaking the language of all the jargons that are out there, AI and everything else. There's tons of jargon. And I'd rather not speak jargon. I'd rather speak English where I can explain to an eighth grader, like, hey, here's what we're doing, right? And I'm going to stop my presentation. I'm going to leave 1 minute to answer any questions because this has been just a fascinating time to live in. AI is literally going to change the way we do business. And what we have to figure out is how the revenue creation process starts in 2026, not just cost reduction. With that in mind, 15 minutes to the dot. Happy to answer any questions. If not, I'm available. Reach me out on LinkedIn or Patient Prism, and we'll absolutely would love to have a conversation about how are you finding these needles in haystacks, right? Because that's all you need is figuring out that one insight and the next best action that you need to take to drive more revenue and more EBITDA growth in 2026 and beyond. With that in mind, thank you so much for having me, guys.